Nobody puts
Well,
baby in the corner.
I did. I put
Nobody
baby in the
puts
corner. I told
Joe
you that story.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You did?
I put the real. Yeah, I put the real baby in the corner. Jennifer Gray. I put her.
Why'd you do that?
She came into my work one time, and when I was working in LA, and she asked for a product, and the product happened to be in the corner of the store. So I'm like, yeah, it's over there in the corner. And she goes, "You did not just do that." I'm like, "I'm so sorry."
It's time for Bourbon with Friends, the bourbon podcast that never takes itself too seriously. Pull up a chair, grab a glass, and remember, a bourbon with friends can change the world. Here we go.
Well, that's how you put baby in the corner, I guess.
Put the baby in the corner.
Lord.
Me and Patrick Swayze.
Okay.
Right. How you do that? Okay, I'm sorry. I took things off track.
It's fine.
I'm ready.
No, that happens. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Bourbon with Friends. Myself, Adrian, and Martin are here to talk about whiskeys from around the world and how a bourbon with friends can change the world. How are you guys doing?
Ooh,
How's your weekend?
it's good, man. You know, kind of quiet, kind of chill.
Yeah.
Report in, Adrian. How we doing with dry January?
It's going. I have a feeling this weekend's going to be a tough one, but I have it.
You got it.
I'm here for this. Like, it ain't going nowhere. So
yeah, it's all those
good.
challenges. It might be challenging, yes, because there's always gonna be those temptations, but that'll prove your resolve a little bit. So
I'm I don't know. I like to say I'm pretty tough. So
I would say so.
Self-proclaimed.
Yeah. I had a question for you guys.
Okay.
I made it sound like it was gonna be personal, but it's not. Do you guys have a whiskey that you would consider like a cabinet, shelf, whatever staple? Like something that's always going to be there. Like no matter what, something that is
First
like
thing that comes to my mind is Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond. That's like that is one bottle I've purchased more than one of. Certainly. Okay. That and JTS Brown, I purchased that more than once.
Yeah. Solid.
Yeah.
Mr. Doer.
That's a tough question.
Yeah. They can be, considering it's probably not for like people who are like casual drinkers, but for the people like us where, I don't think any of us have less than 50
I don't know.
bottles.
I feel like my palate changes. Like, I feel like it just continues to evolve, Mm-hmm. I say that about Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond, but like this year I tried a couple double oaked ryes that like just changed my whole life. So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I would definitely buy both of those again to drink.
The Heaven Hill's solid. I think in their portfolio stuff, and it's funny how the journey of that Heaven Hill, because it was the 6-year bottled and bond for a long time, that got kind of retired, and they brought out the 7-year, and then the 7-year almost got allocated there for a little bit, like where it was difficult to find the 7-year. But then Heaven Hill obviously did something, and I see it all the time now, and at a good price, like $38. It's a solid,
roughly,
it's a solid buy.
I'm going to go with Ugadal or Ardbegg's Ugadal, Dewar's 12, and I got to do the company I work for, 10th Mountain Rye.
Sure.
So
the Oogie though, man,
it's a great rye. It's a great rye.
It is a great rye. The Ugadal was one of the first peated whiskeys I ever got into, and it's jumped up in price dramatically, unfortunately. But it's still that is a solid bottle because it's essentially the cask strength 10-year.
Yep.
And it's that one's really, really good. I have one. Well, when it comes to Scotch or single malts, I guess it would probably Orchard House would probably be something that I consistently have from Bwfpodcast. That's one that I find buying all the time. Good price points, a delicious blend. But for more in like the bourbon rye thing, mine is actually the Woodinville rye, the 100% rye. That one is one just that I latched onto in Colorado when I kind of started discovering Woodinville. And I remember that I think within 3 or 4 months, I probably went through maybe 6 bottles of that, just like sharing it out, having it myself. I like was literally only drinking that. I just love that rye so much. I actually just finished a bottle of it, which is convenient because today on the show, we have Brett Carlile from Woodinville. So I was not just sucking up to you. I promise that is one of my favorite ryes, honestly. Like I love that rye so much.
And yet he was sucking up.
Appreciate those sentiments, but yeah, I appreciate the suck up as well.
Yeah. I figured I had to do it. You know what I mean? I just set the stage and that way. But yeah, it's
Let me ask you a question. Have you tried our 100% rye at cast strength?
I haven't. I've never found it. I knew about it and I was always kind of keeping my eye out, but I never found it. And I was like,
it's probably, if I had to choose any of our products to go to, our cast strength 100% rye. It is candy in a glass.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I always recommend that to those who enjoy our rye whiskey for sure. We do. There's some floating around throughout the country. We sell a limited amount of our private select ryes to certain accounts, but we'll see how this podcast goes. I might have to ship you guys some cast strength rye. But
yes, please, guys, make sure this goes good. Everybody on their best behavior. God damn it!
I know, right? I'm thinking rye.
I gotta shut up.
That's been my year. Like I've been on the rye train.
Yeah. I think we all have. I think it's been interesting. Do you see that? And we'll get in our interview here in a second. But do you see that? Do you feel like the ryes in general from like your portfolio has been more recently? Because I figure a lot of people are starting to get into ryes more than ever because there's so many different offerings.
Yeah, rye is an interesting one. I always had higher hopes that it would be a better seller than it is, but at the end of the day, bourbon is always king.
Sure.
And I think people have maybe had a bad experience with rye whiskey at some point. Most people think that rye is really aggressive and in your face and just too overpowering, which is not the case with the way we produce our rye whiskey.
100%. Yeah.
So no pun intended there on the 100%.
Yeah. I had a bad experience with rye myself when I first got into whiskey, and I can't even remember what it was. I know it was a Heaven Hill product. I can't remember which one it was. Pikesville. That's what it was. And then I had that, and I just did not like it. It tasted like pond water to me. And I just stayed away from ryes until this year, and I've just been down that rabbit hole with your guys'. Last year in 2023 is when I got really into ryes. So yeah, good.
For me, a lot of the ryes out there years ago when we were sampling through, I got like a distinct, like really grassy or like a dill note, which I didn't like. I don't like dill. Call me crazy. I'm not a dill pickle guy. I'm a sweet pickle guy. I don't like dill dip with carrots, and it just turned me off to ryes. And early on, when we were consulting with the late great Dave Pickerel, I'm like, Dave, how do we produce a rye whiskey? It doesn't have that dill note. And he goes, I cannot tell you where that dill note comes from. His best guess was it was a variety of the rye that was used, maybe some of the fermentation distillation techniques that were used. He said the only way to try is just go for it and see what happens. And that's kind of what we did in our early beginnings with our rye whiskey. And lo and behold, I never have tasted that dill note in our rye. So that made me very, very happy.
There definitely isn't. I mean, we're Adrian and myself, we're in Indiana, and I associate that dill note with a lot of the ryes that come out of people who are using MGP. And again, I think there's some great stuff that is used has MGP in it. I'm not knocking MGP. I think there's some really good stuff I enjoy, but even places like Starlight or like Spirits of French Lake, they have their ryes, and I definitely get that dill note. I don't mind it so much, but I can see how you can be a little bit thrown off with something like that.
I really think there was not really any rye grain grown in Washington State until we asked our farmer to grow it specifically for us, and he uses a different style of rye than most out there, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Just the climate that it's grown in. Most rye is dry land rye. He's irrigated, so he has complete control of growing the rye, and it's it's a different style of or strain of rye than typically what's used in most American whiskey distilleries. So I think that partly is the reason we don't have that note I dislike.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. All right, Adrian, I know you got a question. Sorry, I just was curious.
I know.
About
I'm gonna
rye
get
whiskey.
the show on the road.
Yeah.
Not that wasn't.
We have an agenda.
We do. So we like to start out asking people to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. But one thing I want to tag on to that is, on your website, it talks about you and your best friend or your friend that you started this company with. I'm curious about if there was a moment that the dream came alive, or if it just kind of grew over time, if there's a story a little bit deeper that we could hear with that.
Yeah, I'm told the story a million times, and I'm happy to tell it more. It can be a long story, so I'll give you the condensed version due to the interest of time. But Orland Sorensen, my best friend from college, him and I always enjoyed whiskey together. In college, it was always the stuff on that bottom shelf because we were super poor. And once we got out of college and really started exploring, stuff further up the shelf, and really grew an appreciation for American whiskey. We went through a Scotch phase. We still enjoy Scotch whiskeys, but we really, at the end of the day, fell in love with American whiskey, bourbon in particular. And after college, we would get together on Friday nights with a group of friends and play poker together. And it seemed that Orland and I were always trying to bring a unique bottle to share with the group. And it kind of became our thing. And if we showed up empty-handed, it was like they didn't want to play poker with us. They wanted us to leave and not come back. So that was kind of our thing. And, we were in different career paths. Orland was a commercial airline pilot. I was in sales for a construction materials company. We're kind of doing our thing, and we talked about wanting to start a business together, and we had no idea what that was going to be. And we bounced a lot of crazy ideas off each other, and a lot of them are laughable if I spoke of some of the ideas right now, but nothing was really sticking. And we grew up in a town next to Woodinville, a neighboring town, so about a 5-minute drive. But in Woodinville, which is a really small town where we're located, there was all these wineries that were popping up. Chateau Ste. Michelle Winery had been there since the late 70s. And they had this huge tourism built in. And all these small producers from Eastern Washington, where all the grapes are grown, started to kind of see that there was traffic in Woodinville. And so they started setting up tasting rooms and small wineries in Woodinville. Red Hook Brewing, which was one of the pioneers of the craft beer movement, had their large production facility in Woodinville. Currently, they're not there anymore, but when we started, they were under full production. So we kind of saw this thing going on, and obviously Seattle is the home of Starbucks, and we started seeing that, people were willing to pay money for, in a sense, craft coffee. So we saw in our backyard, we had a craft coffee movement, craft beer movement, and all the craft wineries popping up around us. So we started to ask ourselves, well, why not whiskey? No one's doing whiskey. And started to do some research together, and found out there was really not a lot of information online at that time on whiskey distillery, whiskey distillation. And so, undeterred, we just kept doing deep dives and started to make phone calls on, why couldn't we start a whiskey distillery? Well, we found out pretty quick how tough it is to start a whiskey distillery from scratch. Back in 2009, when we were doing our deep dive, we wrote a business plan, and we started scratching our head like, wow, you got to invest all this capital in equipment. You have to have a place to make it. And you have to buy the raw ingredients. You have to use a brand new barrel each time, and you wait years and years and years for your product to mature. How are we ever going to get this thing off the ground? So that was the biggest roadblock. It was like, how are we going to make this work? And we didn't have deep pockets. We self-funded this thing. We literally sold homes and cashed 401ks in. And back to my talk about poker nights, we literally went all in, pushed our chips in the middle, and said, we feel so strongly about this, we're going to do it. And there were certain things that we had to achieve to make this dream a reality. And in our business plan, we talked about we only wanted to source grain from Washington State. The eastern part of the state is all agricultural driven. And so why source grains from anywhere else when we can get it from our home state? The second thing we were looking to do was find the best distilling equipment in the world. And at the time, there was only one manufacturer in the United States. And then we started looking into Germany, and there was lots of still manufacturers in Germany, and started really comparing apples to apples on what they were providing. And then, the third piece to the puzzle was we had no clue how to make whiskey. So we needed to find a mentor. And we didn't know who that was going to be. There was really no whiskey consultants out there at the time. And if you think about it, back in 2009, arguably 7-8 distilleries in the country made all the world's bourbon, correct? But there was yet lots and lots of brands on the shelf. But all the juice was coming from a select few places. And if you think about those places that were making the whiskey, those master distillers were pretty much passing their knowledge down to their proteges, or kept it within the family. Well, long story short, we got in contact with a man named Dave Pickerell, who was the master distiller at Maker's Mark for 14 and a half years. He was with Makers when they were under 100,000 case brand. And when he left Makers, they were about 1 million case brand. So he really knew his stuff, and he was just starting to do some consulting work. It's a long story on how we conned him into coming out from Kentucky and teaching us how to make whiskey. But that was the third piece of the puzzle we were missing. And we finally conned Dave into coming out. And we were fortunate in our timing, because years later, he was so busy with other startup distilleries, and he had his hand in the Whistle Pig project and the Metallica whiskey. And that was one he was very excited about. So we hired Dave to come teach us how to make whiskey. And he literally walked in the door the first day we were ready to start grinding corn and start making bourbon, not knowing anything about how to do it. So Dave, I don't know if you guys have ever had the privilege of meeting Dave, but he was a guy that you could ask him a question and he always had an answer. And half the time I thought he was full of BS, but we always found out at the end of the day, always trust Dave, because he never steered us wrong. And we took a lot of his advice and we took it to heart. And I think that's why we, are still around 15 years later and still growing. So he was phenomenal. Is a phenomenal asset to us. I mean, he was a chemical engineer by trade, even before going to Maker's Mark. And he was an incredible teacher and teaching us everything we needed to know to be proficient bourbon and rye whiskey distillers. So that's kind of the condensed version of kind of how it all came to be and how we kind of put it together. Was there a second part to your question?
Just to talk maybe a little bit about, what your role is with Woodinville. And maybe
so
if you want to talk about what Orleans is too, just to kind of how you guys, because you talked about how you guys balance each other out, kind of.
Yeah, it's in this business, there's a business side and there's a production side, and you kind of need one of each. And, we both have our strengths and our weaknesses, and Orland's weaknesses are my strengths and vice versa. And we kind of mesh well together. The first piece of advice all of our friends and family told us when we told them we were quitting our jobs and starting a whiskey distillery said, A, you're crazy. B, do not start a business with your best friend, because you will not be best friends for long. And honestly, I think we're closer than we've ever been 15 years into this business. We just work very well together. We're both incredibly driven. If there's a goal ahead, there's nothing in our way that's going to stop us from achieving that goal. And that's how it's always been. And, in the beginning, there was a lot of doubters to what our plan was. And that was the motivation to get out of bed every morning and go prove them wrong. I mean, there were days when in the beginning, for the first few years, there were, many 16 to 18 hour days when there was not a lot of sleep involved to get this thing off the ground.
I love that. I think that really gives you a good foundation for your whiskey to stand on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
And that was in the beginning. That's an important thing. We saw a lot of people out there that were buying MGP or whatnot and putting it in a bottle and calling it craft, and trying to hide behind that. Which I have no problem if that's your business model, but be transparent about it. But we saw a lot of deception, and that kind of rubbed us wrong. And
collusion. Yeah.
We said that we are always going to make our whiskey from scratch.
Love that.
I do, and like I think I kind of hinted upon it earlier when we were talking about MGP, and I'm not gonna lie that like it does mildly disappoint me when I see that like on the front of on the front of a thing they have like all this about craft and all this, and on the back distilled in Indiana on the back, and I'm just like if that's your thing, like you said, that's cool. It's just like let us know so I can make that decision if this is something that like I would consider craft, and I don't consider that when it's so mass produced like that. Just because they're trying to maybe get there eventually, to the point where they start distilling their own stuff. That's different than continuously just having that as their business model. So I agree with that.
Correct. Don't get me wrong. MGP makes really quality stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But we've always been about transparency. When we give tours of the facility, there's nothing to hide behind. There's no lies to hide, and we're an open book. We tell everybody everything. And Dave told us early on when we were experimenting with different mash bills, he's like, I can give you the Maker's Mark mash bill. We can try it, but you can't out makers. No. He goes, you could give your mash bill on how you make your whiskey to somebody else across the country, and that guarantee they could not replicate the way it tastes, the way you guys make it.
Yeah.
So,
and I was actually going to ask this question later on, but I think you mentioned it a little just briefly there about the still from Germany, because that's really interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of procured that?
Yeah. So we were looking all around and educating ourselves on distillation equipment, and most distilleries in Kentucky are continuous column stills, and our whole idea was, is there a better way to distill alcohol to get a more pure product? And was speaking with a lot of these manufacturers, going batch distillation where you're physically making a heads, hearts, and tails cut each run, and you're not continuously feeding a column still, is a better way to refine the alcohol and get the more pure hearts run than continuous distillation. And so in talking with a lot of these different still manufacturers, we settled on, it's a pot still, but with an attached 8-plate column on the side. So basically it really allows good separation of heads, hearts, and tails. By running the pot still and then running it through a column as well to be a good separation. So we're able to collect the hearts we want and make our precise heads and tails cuts.
Love that. That was interesting because we were reading about that, and Brian and I get really nerdy. And so Adrian's starting to get a little bit more nerdy when it comes to like equipment, but like we get super nerdy about it. So I love just learning where, the reasoning why you pick a certain still, right? Like, I mean, and just in general, we're actually going to have a distillery kind of rundown equipment wise later in the podcast. But you mentioned that, so I wanted to bring it up there because I thought that was really cool. And it was something that kind of stood out to me when, we've talked to so many different distillers at this point. It's just really interesting the reasoning behind why they pick or how they get their still, who they're getting to make their still for them. And obviously there's some really cool ones. We've heard everything from people who get it from like Forsyth, or we had obviously like Vendome, like the kind of like it's just really cool to understand why you guys are choosing that specific one.
So Dave really was pushing us to buy a Vendome still, and we decided to go with a German still. And when he actually ran it for the first few times, he actually fell in love with it. He had never really run one, but we actually did some modifications. He was like, all right, we can make some modifications to make this thing more efficient and run better for you guys. So he's like, do you have a welder? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, call him in here. Tell him to bring these these pieces of stainless pipe, and we're going to make some modifications to this still. And so basically we modified it from the way it arrived from Germany to fit our distillation style. We pretty much run it. It's a pot and column still, but we are able to run it like a continuous column still on the way we run it.
That's super cool.
I want to know so much more.
I know. That's we could literally just talk about stills, but we'd lose probably.
Yeah.
The people who just want to hear about whiskey, tell me more.
You're all gonna have to come out to Woodinville, and we can show you how this thing works.
Yeah,
we run 3 of them right now.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Oh no, vacation.
Yeah.
There's a handful of places I would like to go that are in Washington over there.
And we can see
Oregon. We could like bebop up.
Yeah, make a journey out of it.
Yeah.
100%.
And we know our friend Will Lee's up that way, sort of. So like,
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah. Shout out Will.
Yeah.
He's never going to hear this, but
he's never going to hear this.
No, probably not.
So I'm really curious. How did you barter, beg, or coerce Dave to get up there? I'm really curious on how you were able to do that back then.
All right. So we called him. We got his number in a roundabout way. It was his cell phone number. We called him, and we were all nervous. It was like asking a girl out on a first date, and just kind of spit out our little elevator pitch real quick over the phone. And Dave, in his Southern drawl, said, "Boys, slow down 1 second. I can't understand a word you're saying." And he goes, I'm actually shopping with my family right now. I'm gonna have to call you back. I'm like, all right. Well, he never called back. And so we tried him again, couldn't get a hold of him. And I'm like, yeah, he's ghosting us. Well, we had seen that Dave was going to be at a whiskey fest in Chicago. And during the VIP hour, he was going to be doing a whiskey talk. So we decided one of us needed to fly out there and meet him in person. So we were very busy with the build out of our facility. So Orland got on an airplane, bought the VIP ticket, went in there early, found Dave, went up and introduced himself. And at that moment, Dave said, "For you to fly out here from Seattle shows me how serious you guys really are. Tell me when you want me in Woodinville, and I'm going to be there." That's he was a kind of a handshake kind of guy. And that meant a lot to him that we actually would fly out there just to introduce ourselves. And that's what kind of sealed the deal with Dave. And like I said earlier, we were pretty lucky that he wasn't jam-packed with clients at the time. He had just started doing some consulting work. And I feel like we got way too much of his time versus others. We really hogged Dave for the first few years of our existence, and feel very fortunate about all that time we had with Dave. Just let alone for the stories that guy could tell about the industry and just the insights that no one gets to hear. And all right, I got to tell you something. You can't tell anybody this, and he would just give us all the dirt on what's going on behind the scenes, and it was pretty incredible.
That'd be amazing
So
just to hear any of those stories.
Did you choose Dave because he had started consulting, or was there another reason that you were drawn to him?
Well, we knew we needed a mentor that knew how to make American whiskey the right way, and there was no one out there. Honestly, there was no one that had the resume, the pedigree that he had. I mean, being at Maker's Mark for 14 and a half years, I'd say he could make a pretty damn good bourbon. So obviously there's a lot of trust in putting our faith in Dave to teach us the right way. And, a lot of trust in him to think that we'd be good enough students to make good whiskey and listen to him.
That's awesome.
God, well, I really want to keep going with this, but I know there's more questions. And
we can do whatever you guys want. This is your show.
Well, fuck, that's true. Adrian, you got a question? Because I'm gonna ramble on about that.
Okay,
but I'll probably ask afterwards.
So from what I saw, you guys have like 3 mainstay expressions, I would say. Straight bourbon, straight rye, and then you have the straight bourbon finished in port barrels.
Yep.
Any reason you chose those three? And do you foresee having any more that will be kind of your mainstays?
Great question. So this is another piece of advice that Dave gave us early on. He said, you need to pick a few products that you want to make and make them well. Do not be, this is his name for distilleries that made a million different products. He said, do not be the Baskin Robbins of distilleries. Don't make the 31 flavors.
Yeah.
Hang your hat on a solid flagship bourbon. And then you guys have expressed interest in rye whiskey. Let's explore rye whiskey. Let's make those two products and make them well. So that's all. So literally everything out of Woodinville, the base is our flagship bourbon, which is 72% corn, 22% rye, 6% malt, or it's our 100% rye whiskey. Now, as the years have passed and we've had a lot more mature whiskey to play with, we've been doing a lot of finishing experiments. And that's how the port finish bourbon became one of our core products in our lineup. It was literally an experiment. We do an annual harvest release at the distillery every year where we do a unique whiskey we release. And this was an experiment that we tried, and it turned out really, really well. And the feedback from everybody that tasted it and bought it was just like, you've got to add this to your full-time lineup. You got to have it available all the time. And so we ended up ramping that up, and that's why it's our third SKU. Now, I've done, I think, 27 different barrel finishing experiments over the years, and all of them very cool and unique. I could talk about that for probably a couple hours.
I want to know more about that.
And we're going to taste one here tonight, or you already tasted it, the Sauterne finish. That was our harvest release this year. And that took me a few years. I've been wanting to do that for a while, but it took me a few years to finally procure some really good Sauterne barrels to do my finishing experiment in.
I love Sauternes, man.
Like those are kind of hard to get your hands on sometimes.
They're really, really hard. I work with several barrel brokers around the country, and I'm always like, if you ever find these, buy them. And it just took a couple of years to really nail down some good ones.
Where'd you pertain the Sauternes barrels from?
So the brokers I work with will not tell me the source of where they came from.
Got it.
Oh, that's rude.
Yeah. I know. I always ask, and they just like, most of our clients do not want us to disclose the source, which I think is weird.
Yeah. Why is that? Like, is it just from a purely like legal standpoint, or is it just like more of just like
I think it's they want to keep money, so they're not going to tell you where they're getting it.
Yeah, they don't want me to go around them and go direct to the source, I guess.
Yep. Right.
That makes sense.
Can't tell all their secrets.
So they got to keep their job as well.
Yeah, I was very excited when I saw that you guys were having Sauternes. Sauternes has become my 100% my favorite finish. I just think it just works really great with whiskey. It's I'm not always so big on something like the sherry, like PX sherry and stuff like that. To me, it's too sweet. Sauternes to me is just perfect. So when I saw that you guys had that, I'm literally like, you guys obviously were very gracious to send me this one, but it is not going to last.
God.
Yeah, it's damage. It's not going to last. It's not going to last. I love Sauternes finish. Like,
he probably hasn't shared any of that either.
I definitely haven't. No, I take that back. I did take that one too. I did take that one to. I brought that to our Friendsgiving. So I did bring that there. So that was sitting on the table for that. So
okay.
Brett, we had like a Friendsgiving with our friend group, and I shared that one, and that one went down well. So it wasn't all me that did that.
I was going to say that's some fine work, Martin.
Have you tried to do an Amontillado finish?
No.
That's the only other type that I've recently tried that I just
so good
adored, other than like a Sauterne finish. But so I was just curious. You said 27, so I thought maybe that might be one of them.
Well, actually, one of our most popular finishes we've ever done. Obviously, we're from Washington State, and we're known for apples. So we actually took apple wood from an apple tree, had it toasted. So toasting the apple wood caramelizes the wood sugar and the apple wood, and we would insert the toasted apple wood into the barrel to do the finish on. And the whiskey extracts, so fully mature, at least 5 years old bourbon, and it extracts the sweetness out of the apple wood. And I don't know, it's just magic. And
I saw on your website that you had the Applewood staves, right? Is that the one that you're talking about?
Applewood stave finished bourbon, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
it sounds amazing.
We did a national release last year on it. So there's some out in the markets. Yep. I don't know. We have a product locator on our website. So if you're trying to hunt some down, you might be able to find some. And then I was like, well, it works so well for bourbon. Why not try our 100% rye with an Applewood stave finish?
I bought that one.
And that one's kick ass.
It's really good. I found it by me. Actually, it's Adrian. If you want it, it's at a store by me. I know a place that still has quite a few of them.
I would do that.
Really good.
Do that.
Really
yeah,
good.
You should grab that, and I'll pay you back for that.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the bottle. So I'll just kind of go through again the few ones that I'm assuming all of us are kind of getting into. The one that we were just talking about was the Sauternes finish. So right there. We are also drinking, obviously, their flagship bourbon right here. I did get that, and it's already a healthy dent in it. I just got it like Friday, so be proud.
It's a really cool statement on the bottle too.
I love their bottles. We're gonna get into the bottle design for sure. And then this is the Founder's Find. I would say, of course, talk about all three, but this one's got such an interesting story behind it. So if you want, as we're kind of going through these, to kind of talk about this one for sure.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that now? The Founder's Find?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah.
So let me back up to what I said earlier. I said, part of our deal was we were never going to source any liquid and put it in a bottle. Everything in a bottle of Woodinville was always made from scratch at our distillery. Back in end of 2017, we were acquired by Moet Hennessy. And after that, they just gave us more capital to keep expanding production. And they were working on some other whiskey projects, and Orlin was involved, my business partner, in that. And so they were looking to source some American whiskey. So Orlin had all these samples coming in the door, and he would taste me blind on all these samples and get my opinion and feedback. And there's a certain one I tried, and I was just kind of blown away by. And I'm like, man, what is that? And he's like, I'll tell you later. And I'm like, all right. So long story short, Orlin stepped away from the business for about a year. And when he was away, he really got into the world of sourced whiskey and had all these contacts from when he was trying to source some liquid for this Moet Hennessy project. And he started entering this specific whiskey in some whiskey competitions. So obviously how the competitions work, you enter your product months and months before the results come out. Mm-hmm. Well, after he had entered these products under a different brand name, he was considering starting something on the side. I convinced him to come back to Woodinville because I missed him and missed my best friend at work every day. So he came back to Woodinville, and I think he'd been back for a couple weeks, and the results started coming out on this whiskey that he entered in these competitions, and it was cleaning up. And he's like, well, what do we do here? I'm like, well, because he had personally bought that whiskey. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. He's like, well, this thing's winning competitions. He's like, what do you think about releasing it under the Woodinville label and being very transparent that we did not make this, and it was a whiskey that was too good not to share? And I'm like, we've always been about transparency. And I'm like, I like that angle. It still feels a little dirty to me that we're putting something else in our bottle that we actually did not make. But this is a one-off, and it's already proven to show very, very well in these high-profile whiskey competitions. And so the story behind this whiskey, it was distilled in Tennessee, and back in I forget the exact year, they were trying to lobby to be able to use reused barrels for aging, because Tennessee whiskey is just like bourbon. It has to be a brand new charred oak barrel.
Yep.
So to show proof of concept, they took used barrels, they scraped the char out inside, and then recharred them, and then filled them with whiskey. I think 5 years down the road after they've been aging, they were denied their request to use reconditioned barrels. So they sold this whiskey off to another distillery that was looking to do a blend out of it. Anyway, this other distillery never ended up using this whiskey. So it literally was just sitting and continued to age. And when Orland was looking for just different supplies of bulk whiskey for sale out there, this one came along, and that's the one he tried me on blind, and I was blown away by. And it's the one that won all these awards. So I think it's 96% 12 to 13-year-old Tennessee whiskey, and there was like 4% 15-year-old MGP in there.
Yeah, it says right on the back.
So... Oh, you fact check me. Am I good?
I know, right?
Yeah. It says the one.
Damn, just call him out. Why don't you?
Well, I'm like looking at, you said it right as I saw it on the bottle. I'm sorry. Was not trying to do that at all. I was just, I don't know. I'm admiring the bottle. Okay.
So this was one of those things, like I said, we were very transparent about. We were very transparent that we did not make this whiskey, but we wanted to release it so everybody could enjoy it. And that's how it came to be.
It's super unique. I love that. Like, I will say that if I was to try like your guys' stuff, I would be like, this just doesn't feel Woodinville to me. But like at the same time, now like I'm drinking, there's certain aspects of it that like I don't know if it's just because it's in your guys' bottle, but there like it could maybe fool me a little bit. But it's very good.
Did you see the description at the bottom, Martin? Did you read that?
Where are we looking?
It says, from Indiana with a vicious body, incredible depth, and mile-long finish. Like, is that viscous? Oh,
viscous.
That's viscous.
But I like vicious. That's kind of cool.
You want to borrow
You should have used vicious. You want to be in a marketing department for us?
Shit, Adrian.
With a vicious body.
With a vicious body.
I was like, what? I should have these on just for the record.
Yeah, I was good. Yeah, she like how she put her glasses on nonchalantly.
I can see it now. All right.
I can see.
I'm done talking for today.
So I think it's time for the. Well, actually, we're still going through stuff, right? We're still
I want to go through all these because I'm drinking the Sauternes right now.
I was gonna say, what are some notes?
Good.
Let's hear it. What do you guys got?
I'm not as far as Martin because I like to keep these for a while and enjoy them.
Sound a little personal.
Yeah, if you read the bottom, the back label of the Sauternes, I give my tasting notes on there towards the bottom of that long paragraph.
Yeah.
I don't even want to look at it right now because
Don't look.
I don't like.
You guys need to guess. I want to see if you match
I
up
already looked
with Mr. Carlile here.
I sometimes pick out weird things I taste in whiskey, and one of my tasting notes I've never tasted in whiskey before, but it just kept coming back to me. And it's a certain kind of fruit.
I get that all the time. I pull out dragon fruit from a bunch of different shit that I eat or drink from, but off the nose, I'm getting limoncello.
Yeah, that's not wrong.
And I really want limoncello because I can't have sugar right now, so this is pissing me off.
Oh, that's right. You're doing the carnivore thing, right?
Yeah.
I wrote down that when I tried it, wrote down that it was like very peachy, fruity. So
poor Arlo, dude. Like you're just on this carnivore diet, just farting a storm, right? Aren't you?
Yeah, that poor dog.
Poor dog. But no, you know what? There's a note that I'm getting, and again goes into the Sauternes thing. It's strawberry, but it's not like a fresh cut strawberry. It's like those, those cool cereals you used to get back in the day, like when you were a kid, and they had like the dry, like the dehydrated strawberries.
Oh yeah.
It's exactly those. So it's like a little more, just almost like a little more sugary. So like that's what I get. I did look, so I'm not going to say the one that I know, and that's kiwi. I'm assuming. I
pear.
Pear, yeah.
Pear and I don't know. Kiwi, every time I kept tasting, I'm like, I don't know why my mind's going towards kiwi. I don't eat a lot of kiwi, but I just kept getting kiwi. I actually went to the store and bought a kiwi, cut it up. I'm like, am I crazy? I'm like, no, I'm getting
No.
Kiwi.
I know that it's obviously there could be power suggestion happening right now with me, but like I remember when I was younger, like I would my mom would make kiwi, but I'd always eat like the fuzzy shit on it, and it's like it tastes more like the peel, yeah. So it's almost more like the skin than the meat, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. It's so good. I'm so glad that you guys did a Southern's cask.
Well, now I know why you stay skinny. You just kept eating the skins.
I know I wasn't eating shit else.
I used to do that, like eat
I did
apple
too.
skins.
I love the apple skin.
Yeah.
Chew on orange rind. Yeah.
Yep.
You guys.
I was also the kid that would eat everything that no one else did because I just was that kid. So if they didn't want it, I would eat it.
Look, a dog turd. No, probably not.
No.
I love that you just went to that.
Yeah, no, I was talking about like the lunchroom. Like, oh, you're not gonna eat that? I'll take it.
I would like this. I would like to see your guys' rye finished in this at some point.
Yeah, I'm already on the hunt to get more Sauterne barrels. Just
I think that'd be wonderful.
Brett, let's talk later because let's talk later.
Okay.
Fucking
Perfect.
Fucking people up, dude.
Hey,
this is
part
good.
of my job.
Where are we at? What are you guys drinking right now?
The Sauternes.
Sauternes.
Is it saw or so? I got yelled at once that when I said Sauternes, and they're like, "No, it's Sauternes." Is it Sauternes or Sauternes?
I don't know. Tomato, whatever.
English.
I'm not. It's like I'm not French. I say chocolate, not chocolat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go.
So
I mean, this is like on the back end of this. It's kind of unique.
Super unique.
I'm getting
Chocolate.
that sweet honey, but it's not honey. It's
like
I can't describe it.
It's almost like like those toffee My Werther's candies.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And then
I'm getting creamy toffee.
Have you ever had a grilled peach that you put in like brown sugar?
Yeah.
Afterwards,
I see that. Yeah.
If you can do a grilled peach with brown sugar in it,
you're making me hungry now.
Oh, jeez,
I'm making me hungry, and I can't have any of this shit.
Like peach cobbler sounds really good right about now.
I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I just DoorDashed while we were talking, so
I'm gonna go get some beef jerky later.
I was hungry. So no, definitely
beef jerky and an elk steak.
There's these cookies that my mom makes my brother-in-law every year because for Christmas at the Christmas time, and nobody else eats them except him. They're good, but he has extra ones, and it's those little sugar cookies with the Hershey Kiss on top.
Those should be peanut butter cookies with a Hershey Kiss on top.
It's not. She does something different. She wilds out, my sister. And so it reminds me of that. So kind of just that kind of just dough, with a milk chocolate. That's what I'm getting.
Now you know why no one else eats them, because they're supposed to be peanut butter, not sugar.
Tell my sister I said that.
Now I just know we're all hungry.
I'm kind of intrigued now. I want a sugar cookie with a Hershey's Kiss.
See,
Martin,
well,
my mom
does
does the same
that
thing.
Could be bad, but
yeah.
My mom does the same thing. She does the sugar cookie with the.
She also does she does the Buckeyes, so she does the peanut butter with that. Like she does the Buckeyes.
Yeah, we do those too. Yeah,
I love Buckeyes so much.
All right, back to whiskey, John.
So yeah, we're on a podcast. That's right.
Yeah, let's go back to the.
We got really casual there for a second.
Let's go back to the founder's pick now.
Okay, let's do it. I won't look at notes on that one.
Let me put my glasses back on.
I don't think there's notes on this one. Since this was Orland's baby,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm not doing notes for you, buddy. You're on your own on this one. I don't think you did notes.
I do love how you really broke it out here. It says a one-of-a-kind blend made of 96% 12-year-old whiskey from Tennessee and 4% of 15-year-old bourbon from Indiana, with that vicious body, incredible depth, and the mile-long finish. I think that's a great description of the Finney.
It's pretty nice. It's got like a.
I could smell it.
There's definitely mustier qualities, obviously being older, but I'm trying to nail what is that. It's almost like and I feel like sometimes like when you use these kind of like esoteric notes that people are like ew, but like I think it just depends on how you view it. Like for me, this reminds me a little bit of I'm a big single malt Scotch guy. Brian is as well. Adrian will, who knows, one day she'll like single malts. But it's got almost like an acetone. Running behind it, and I like those kind of notes personally.
I do too. I don't like people saying caramel vanilla and all the time. I like it when people have something like kiwi or something.
Yeah, something
different.
fun.
Definitely a ton of like dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Well,
apple,
you say that.
Crazy. Like
I was thinking apple. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
I actually think dried apricots. If you get dried apricots and then cover it in like a dark chocolate.
Good Lord.
There you go.
That'd be
Brian,
good.
you want to do my tasting notes going forward?
No shit.
Well, he'll pay me. Sure, done.
Yeah, he'll nail the proofs. That's for sure. He's like a weird like savant when it comes to actually like guessing.
So you can taste something and nail what it's bottled at.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Roughly.
Yeah,
it's like I've worked for a distillery for years, and I was born into this industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or he's got like a really sensitive palate.
Or that.
Getting the apples now, definitely like Fuji apples for sure. And maybe that's like kind of like the.
This is really good. It's a bruschetta type flavor. It's a dried meat that I'm getting in the mid palate, but it's a very sweet dried meat where it's almost opening up and like putting all the fucking spices right in the middle. I can't even explain it.
I think you've been on the carnivore diet too long. If you're thinking meat,
I know, right?
No, it's a cured meat.
Everything's bacon.
Everything is bacon.
I was just talking about dried apricots for a second. Come on now.
Yeah,
but that's just in the mid palate. In the very front, it's super sweet. And Martin's right. Like the Fuji apples is dead on with that. And in the back palate, it's still going, which is nuts to me.
Licorice too. Just like a very like maybe that's the acetone note that I was thinking, because now it's turned a little bit more like black licorice. It's so good. It's so different. I think that's what's cool about this. I think the fact that it is obviously presented by Woodinville, and it just kind of shows something. Do you guys think you'll do like this ever again at some point? Like if there was another opportunity like this, obviously I feel like it would have to be like this to do this again, right?
Maybe. Well, I think the cool thing about this one is I don't think anybody's really had an American whiskey aged in reconditioned barrels.
No.
It's so unique and it's so one of a kind. I mean, we couldn't even call it bourbon. It's whiskey from a bourbon mash legally. That's what it's called.
Well, 100%. And what you guys are doing with this is absolutely phenomenal.
So
I'm still trying to nail in this, like the back of the palate, and I can't because it's
on my palate, like I wrote down malty. Is it malty at all? I just wrote that down when I tried it, and I
like Whoppers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like.
I wrote down. I put malty on the palate, and I don't know now why I wrote that, but I think that's
100%. Like I think, and to me that's a note typically associated with single malt Scotch for me, is that like it's just very malt forward. You're getting this on that.
You kind of gave a very single malty kind of note at the beginning, so that kind of made me wonder.
Well, the licorice too is another one for me. Like I typically only find black licorice notes in single malts. Very rare. I very rarely find that in like a bourbon, rye, things like that.
So maybe I'm starting to understand.
You know what, Brian? It's almost like she knows what she's doing, and we've been saying that forever now.
Weird.
I don't feel like it. I really don't feel like it, but okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I think I finally narrowed down that back palate.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to say narrowing it down is a very broad statement for this because everybody has their own tasting palates, right?
Sure.
I'm getting dried out strawberries like you had in the first place in the very back of the palate, but I'm getting that combined with almost a super rich coffee.
Yeah, and I'm not a coffee drinker, but like I've been trying to find coffee notes more often. I think you might be right.
Yes, it's a super rich coffee. So almost, if you've ever had Kona coffee before, like a hazelnut Kona coffee, it's very back of your palate and you've had it fresh. That's what it tastes like to me in the very back. Strawberries mixed with that fresh.
Yeah, when you say that, it reminds me of like a really good like nitro cold brew, like the finish on a nitro cold brew.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's coming from.
Is it because of like and is it because I can see what you mean, because there's almost like kind of that bitter, right?
Yep.
And then that to me, coffee's bitter. So no matter what it is, but I can sort of see that.
Well, like I'll send you one coffee that's not going to be bitter. It's super sweet, but it's super fucking expensive.
Well, it reminds me of, to me, I'm a big like very hoppy beer guy. Like I love the hoppier the better for me. And like when it gets too hoppy, I understand that some people get turned off because it can be bitter, but I love that. And I get a little bit of that from this, like where it's just that kind of hoppiness, bitterness.
Yeah.
I love beer notes and whiskey as well.
I'm just loving everything that we're doing.
Yeah, this is so good. I know.
This is great.
I've been excited to have you guys on. You guys have been like one of my favorite distilleries. Like
I love that it says
smaller
batches, bigger dreams.
Yeah.
That was kind of our tagline from year one. We've just kind of kept it. And
I like that.
That's what you need to keep. You're doing a great job with it.
Yeah, you guys are killing it, man. And like, again, I do have a question about your bottles later, because they're just so stout. I mean, you could beat someone to death with one of these things, man.
Jesus, Martin.
It doubles as a weapon if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, they're stout,
Good
man.
to know.
Well, Adrian, I think it's that time where we ask one specific question.
It is that time. And may I real quick explain the setup for this, Adrian, because this does have to do with you. So, Brett, when we first took over this podcast, we're not the original hosts of Bourbon with Friends, but we did take over in 2023. Was that when it was, or 2024? What happened?
It was
2024.
last year.
What year are we in? So basically last year we took over, and Adrian has, I don't know what the actual phobia is, but she doesn't like squirrels. She hates them. And
how do you not like squirrels?
It's so basically, one on our very first time when we were a podcast, it was a flying one, so it flew into her window, and then hit the ground. None of this is true, Brett.
Not a word. Not a word. I don't actually, though. I wouldn't say I like squirrels, because I really don't. Because there's a lot of them out here. And they're a little bit of a nuisance, but
yeah, anyway. They're a little aggressive with her. So basically, actually, the truth of this, Brett, is we just wanted to have a question that kind of split up things, so we can get nerdy as shit on this podcast. So we wanted something that kind of split it up. So there is an actual story of why we ask a squirrel themed question, but I don't know what it is at that point, because I've made up so many random stories by now. There's been ones from Adrian being robbed by a squirrel to a squirrel hijacking a plane. There's been all sorts of stories. So today's question is going to be Adrian asking a squirrel question specifically for you.
I'm asking the question today. It does not mean I wrote the question. FYI.
No, you did not.
No.
Oh my God. Okay. How many squirrels would it take to take care of your 5 rick houses and bottling line? Also, do they need to wear full bodysuits to keep the hair out of everything?
Well, should we genetically modify the squirrels to be hairless?
Yes.
Okay. So it need to be a genetically modified squirrel, no hair. And I would probably need
to be terrified,
because that's scary as
shit. Thank you for the giant rat.
Yeah, that'd be kind of, a squirrel without hair would look like a giant rat, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yep.
Aren't they related? Aren't squirrels and they're
they gotta be.
Yeah, they are rodents.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not fond.
They aren't marsupials. I can tell you that.
Except for Rocky. That's the only squirrel I like. Yeah,
but he's got.
So what's the average squirrel weigh?
Oh gosh,
a pound and a half.
Well, what type of squirrel are we talking about?
Would not know that.
Are we talking about the eastern gray squirrel? Are we talking
Well, I mean, there's black squirrels, there's gray squirrels, there's the mountain
Adrian's
squirrels, which are a little bit different.
That are about 10 pounds apiece. No, I'm just kidding.
Squirrels in Washington can range from about 2.5 pounds to 5 pounds.
They can get big out here. The Easterns. Yeah. I'm guessing I need about 10,000 squirrels per rick house. So I need 50,000 squirrels to take care of it.
But
they have to be airless.
Modify. So
that's a lot of modification.
Get more.
That's just the rick house. What about the bottling line?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
And they don't have opposable thumbs either, so that's going to get complicated.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why do they? Why?
They can grab branches, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, they have opposable thumbs.
Yeah.
Can they drive cars? Because that'd be cool.
Apparently.
Well, I mean,
tiny ones.
If we're talking squirrels, have you guys ever eaten squirrel?
Yes.
No, but I would try if it was an option.
I had a friend.
Come down here. I'll cook it for you.
Things.
Does it taste like chicken?
It's actually really good.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's lean.
I've heard it's good. I've never tried squirrel.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
I know it.
It's like a rodent.
I mean, I'm.
It's not that bad, depending on where if you get it from the mountains, it's great. If you get it from your backyard, don't eat it.
Yeah, probably not.
Depending on where you live.
Yeah. Just don't, and if it works on a bottling line, definitely don't get it. So,
well, you may get a little tipsy from it. You never know.
That'd be kind of cool.
This is so weird. Okay,
that was one of the weirder questions.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So, based off of everything that you're doing currently, why did you design the bottle that you did to make it this eye-catching? And I know you used a certain designer for your distillery directly, correct? It's Graham.
Well, yeah. So we have
Graham Barm Architects.
Graham Baba was the architect that designed the distillery building, and they designed our barreling and bottling facility over in Quincy on the farm and all of our rick houses. So Orland and I went to them and kind of gave them our vision for what we wanted this building to look like. And when you come visit the distillery, the distillery building we're currently in was constructed in 2014. We started out in a different spot down the street from here, our current location. And we basically wanted it to look like the building had been there for 100 years. And they did a phenomenal job doing that. A lot of reclaimed wood from other projects, a lot of raw steel meant to rust out. It's like modern meets rustic, because then you walk in and see all the copper stills and the stainless steel fermentation tanks and cookers. So it's a pretty cool contrast when you come in and visit the distillery. But as far as the bottle shape, when we were starting out, we had obviously some time before we were ready to put whiskey in a bottle. It had to age. And so Orland and I just started working with a freelance designer. He just kind of went out on his own. He'd never designed a liquor package before, but he was gung-ho and ready to do it. And so we literally would sit down and just kind of start sketching things. And we did tons of market research, going to liquor stores and going to back bars and looking what was out there. And we wanted something that was very unique and not like anything else on the back bar. And so we literally, I think it took us probably 1.5 years, 2 years to fully develop this bottle. And we wanted something, when you picked it up, it needed to be heavy, beefy, and you had to feel like when you grabbed this bottle before you poured a drink that you were ready to have a good time. And that was part of the criteria for designing this bottle. And it's definitely got a lot of heft. It doubles as a weapon if needed. And at the time it was very unique. And, it's been knocked off and copied over the last few years. I've seen.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I've seen many other people that have knocked our bottle off, which is frustrating because we had it was a one of a kind. It was our own design. And obviously we can't patent a bottle shape, but
well, I mean, the articulate design on the inside even. So if you look at the curvature on the inside of the bottle, I'm not sure if I can't hold it up with that arm. My phone.
No, I can see what you're talking about. Like you can see it on the side here.
Not even on the side, but on the very front. So if you look at the corners, the corners actually draw up and it loops around on each corner and goes up to curves. So I am extremely jealous of your design from someone who makes whiskey myself for a living and want to know who this designer is and if I can steal him.
They just square bottles just fit so much better on the shelf. Like
the issue that we find though sometimes is when the back bar's tight, they'll turn the bottle sideways. And you don't label. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's got some embossing, but you can't see the embossing on a back bar. So that's the only challenge. With a round bottle, they're not gonna. It doesn't matter. They're not gonna turn it sideways.
That's true.
That's our biggest challenge. Is it frustrates me when I walk into a bar and I see it sideways, and I know the bottle better than anybody, and so most people wouldn't know our bottle sideways without seeing the label.
Right. Well, I can tell you guys did a phenomenal design, and it's everywhere here in Colorado. So
thank you.
Keep killing it. And I'm going to keep drinking it. So
I appreciate it.
So I know we have a couple more questions, and I'm going to ask this one. So obviously you guys have been doing things for a while, and in the last couple of years, I mean, the craft distillery boom is wild. There are so many new craft distillers. Where do you see it going in like 5 years? And also, how do you think the kind of the recent ratification of American single malt will change that? Do you think more people will be adopting that style of whiskey, or do you think it's going to kind of continue being more craft bourbon, rye, wheated, things like that? Or do you think American single malt is really going to be something new? And do you guys ever want to do something with American single malt?
All great questions. I think it's really cool that the American single malt finally got its own classification.
Yes.
There's a lot of producers in this country and locally that are making phenomenal single malts. Mm-hmm. For me, I do like Scotch, but my love is bourbon and rye. So I don't think we would ever go down the American single malt path. I'm not going to say never, but we're more into the corn and the rye side of things versus an all barley whiskey.
Sure.
To me, it's a, I know it's its own category now, but in a sense, they're almost competing with Scotch whiskey.
Yeah.
The style and the way it's produced, American single malts are produced in that same likeness of Scotch whiskey.
Very much. Yeah.
So it's a tough thing. And I think it's a really cool category. And I think, if anybody, there's a lot of crafty distilleries out there making American single malt. I think we see some really cool stuff coming out in the years to come. Really cool finishes and some cool malt bills that they use. And there's a lot of cool, unique malts being grown in the Pacific Northwest that I know some guys are using and making really phenomenal whiskey with. So
yeah. I always ask just because that is a category that I would love to see represented more. And yeah, you're right. I mean, you guys got like Westland up that way and westward that are doing some really cool things. Pacific Northwest with that category for sure. So I think I was just curious because I would, and that's the thing. Like, you don't know, right? Like, you don't know that right now. You're like, nah, that's not really our category, but you never know where all of a sudden something unique comes up, and then you decide to do it. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see where that goes in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
with that added category. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know it was an uphill climb to get that approved, and I think it's a lot of dedication by everybody pushing to get it done. So I think that's really cool that it's actually official.
I know, and I'm glad that they did the option to have it. It can be new or used oak, because that was always something that I was wondering what they were going to do with, because obviously the style from single malt Scotch is used. Whereas a lot of the times when they were doing American single malts before the ratification, it was typically new oak. So to give that option of having those kind of that opens up a lot of doors to do something kind of unique with each expression they decide to put out. Do we keep it traditional or do we do something kind of new? I think that's kind of cool that they did that. So
yeah, well, for sure. I mean, obviously, new oak is a lot more imparts a lot more flavor than used oak, and barley is typically a more delicate spirit than a corn or rye based whiskey.
Yep,
and so it almost needs to go into used oak and slowly mellow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's that time where we ask so we love the squirrel questions, but we also love this question specifically. And I know, Brian, you're going to go ahead and ask this one.
Yeah. So based off your background and everything that you've done in your entire career, and here comes my maniac dog.
Arlo.
And he's running away again. I really want to know, and all of our audience wants to know, what your favorite whiskey memory is, or spirits memory with the friend, the family member. It could be throughout when you were a kid, when your parents were drinking, or your dad was drinking, or up until now. What do you have a specific memory that you've enjoyed the most, enjoying a glass of whiskey or any spirit in general?
Oh man, I've never really thought about that. That's a great question.
No pressure. I'm not writing a book about this or anything.
Yeah.
No, I honestly think probably my best spirit memory was with Orlin, my business partner, and Dave Pickerel, when we finally decided that our flagship bourbon was ready to be bottled, and tasting that product right out of the barrel, and all of us looking at each other with just like a sense of like accomplishment. Like we've been waiting. It was 5 years old at this time. We've been sitting and tasting and waiting for it to be just perfect. And when we thiefed that whiskey out in each other's glass and we all took a drink, and we just all had a shit eating grin on our face, and we're all just nodding in approval. Like it's time. It's ready. I think that's probably my best memory. Just because it was a lot of hard work, dedication to finally get to that point in our existence, and to be there with my best friend, and then Dave, our mentor and friend, who got us there in that journey. We couldn't have done it without him. I think that right there is probably one of my favorite moments.
Well,
Love it.
I would love to get Martin's opinion on it right now, but currently, as you can tell, he's what you were, and he's a ghost.
Oh, is it doing the ghost thing?
Yes.
Oh yeah, you are gone.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I just see a rusty barrel hoop.
Well, I mean, someone needs to be the rusty barrel hoop in this group. So
yeah. Here, let me see. Hey guys, what I want to do right now. Oh, this is a sponsorship ad, by the way. What I want to do right now is talk about one of our sponsors, because it's the only one that we have. It is 10th Mountain Whiskey out of Vail, Colorado. We all love Colorado. Colorado is a state that looks like a cutting board. It's square. Anyways, you can find them on all social media platforms, as well as 10thwhiskey.com. And guess what? You can use BWF15 for a discount code. The 15 means you get 15% off. That's why we did it, BW15. That makes sense. We'd love for you to go check out their products and what they have there. And you can find them in 42 different states across online. I think that's it. Yeah, 42 different states through online distribution, as well as 30 states across regular retail distribution. Guys, what that means is online means you buy it on the computer. Retail means you buy it in store. So they're everywhere. So go and check them out. Again, if you guys have any questions, go to 10thwhiskey.com. They'll answer any questions you may have. And I want to thank 10th Mountain Whiskey for being our sponsors on BWF Bourbon with Friends podcast.
But that's absolutely phenomenal, getting that experience with Dave, and then also getting that experience with one of your best friends from high school and college.
We went to high school together, but weren't really buds in high school. And then just really learned we had a lot of the same interests and hobbies in college, and just just became best buds.
Well, that's
you mentioned
absolutely
you both have drive too, and that's I think if you're going to start a business with your best friend, like you both got to have that, or it really isn't going to work.
Yep, and it's just we knew early on. I mean, we enjoyed in college. We'd go to class, and then after class, first thing we did was we go to the gym, and we go to the gym every day together, and push each other harder and harder. And we realized, both of us are not afraid of hard work, and get the gym out of the way, then go drink and have fun.
Well, Brett, I think that ends a perfect story to a perfect podcast.
It was great.
And coming up from the new year. And then, we'll talk about coming out there as the Bourbon with Friends, all of us
sure.
together,
You guys are
including Joe in the background.
Open invite. Anybody who wants to come visit, we're more than happy to have you guys out and show you around. And definitely stay in touch. And if you have any insight on where I can find any new finishing barrels, Brian, get a hold of me.
Yeah, we'll talk after this podcast when it's done. And I'll get you lined up with the right people. Cool. All right, everybody. Well, remember, no matter where you're at in the world, a bourbon with friends or whiskey can change the world. Cheers. Have a great day or night wherever you're at. Thanks, y'all.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Bourbon with Friends. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, leave us a review to make it easier for others to find the show. You can also check us out on Instagram at Bwfpodcast. Thanks for listening.